Okay, it's going to be another hard video to put together because some interesting things have happened that the boys have picked up on, which is good. So we have more than one of us seeing what's going on out there, and I think it needs to be discussed because there's some quite interesting things that are going on out there. So, follow the rabbit, hey? Or follow the rabbit, It's going to be a really weird video to put together, but it's going to make a whole lot of sense when you see what the last audio brought and the response from this foreign curial power that usurped the power of the people away from them. It's a difficult thing to know where to start talking about a series of events that's happened, but I think we should start with the rabbit-o-os. So we produced a series called Follow the Rabbit in response to Kiskonan versus New South Wales 2021. And as a response from our audio, we have seen the media go into propaganda overdrive with their sovereign citizen ideology that comes out of the mind of the police. We already discovered that when they put it in their own words that it was their own opinion. Sovereign citizens only exist in the mind of the government or the police. So we look at this rabbit-o-os and we find that Sam Burgess, a former rabbit-o-o, was seen before a certain magistrate that recently got on the media. And we're going to investigate this magistrate a little bit further. So as Charles III becomes King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, King of the Stone of Destiny, we have to look at quite a few things across the board here that are going on, starting with our little former NRL star at the rabbit-o-os, wherein he faced a court over traces of an illicit substance called a drug found in his system. And this is something we could investigate later, given that this government is treating you in the largest capacity of nannying that it's ever done. So we sort of need to investigate this magistrate who has discussed these events on the radio in relation to this sovereign citizen movement that the police have created. We discussed last time the propaganda of David Halpin being pushed all over state media. Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10, ABC. We've discussed how the ABC contacted us in a bid to follow this sovereign citizen ideology, which it itself is now pushing, going against all information provided to the ABC in relation to a curial right and claim as defined in the case at which the ABC reporter Paul had presented to us. He is denying the case that he holds in his hands in preference of following a sovereign citizen ideology in his reporting on behalf of the government. This is very clear now, given what has been published since and how the media reacted with subjects on the ground flying their red flags when interviewed on Anzac Day. Now, we start with a football star that played with the Rabbitohs. Now, I produced Follow the Rabbit series talking about Kisconan versus New South Wales 2021, at which the government sought to respond by going into propaganda overdrive. It is very clear that Follow the Rabbit is relative to the discussion that's going on through this symbology between ourselves and this foreign curial power. The use of justices. I don't think these justices are of their own volition to be talking on the media, given the way that they are talking is very restrictive and very mirror-like. I think they have been given command to present themselves on media under their oath, and that they may be following a line that might not agree with what they believe themselves, although under the pressure of a foreign curial power, are under what would be known as the peril of their lives. We start with this magistrate that has overseen a case with Sam Burgess, a former NRL star that played for the Rabbitohs. And this magistrate has appeared on radio discussing this sovereign citizen movement, but the language at which he's used has almost admitted his own guilt in his actions by trying to use a mirror against what would be an ignorant people that would believe stupid things. There are certain things that he has said within this audio response that would then relate very specifically to his actions rather than the actions of people that have had enough of a government that is flexing an overright power against these people. It might be reason as to why so many people are standing up in courts questioning the line of authority these magistrates hold. And that is a lawful right for anyone to do within a courtroom, is to submit extra paperwork and start lines of questioning relative to the line of authority of those that have brought them before that very courtroom. What if those that had brought them before that courtroom did not have the right to do so? It's a very long discussion to go into, and we're not going to go into it here. But what we will allude to here is that the use of this magistrate, which we will go into, is very pertinent given that he has referred to David Halpin as one of his sister or brother magistrates. A brotherhood, one might say, or sisterhood, one might say, at which you are excluded from, given the delusion that they attempted to push onto Ewa Kisconan whilst in incarceration in New South Wales, now found to be torture under the international humanitarian law. So we start with a magistrate that has mentioned David Halpin and has heard a case about a former NRL player that played for the Follow the Rabbit. This magistrate proclaimed on this audio to be Aboriginal by merely saying yes to the question without venturing further into the fact that he is at his lineage and his ancestry, in fact, English. It is self-proclaimed in media articles that he has an English father who was an orphan, and his last name is McDougall, giving him a Scottish reflection on his ancestry. And given that the English law is patriarchal in that father to son, he is the son of his father, an English man. This man is not Aboriginal, although his mother may have been. This is very important in that they are detracting from the very legal aspect of lineage and ancestry itself in inheritance of what would be considered land and estate. So we have an so-called Aboriginal magistrate who is actually English now overseeing a case that involves a rabbit at which you were told to follow to discover the war crimes that had occurred within our forging and consecration of our crown before our dead on an international sea wherein foreign curial powers did attack that right within those international waters. So, given this magistrate has spoken about this sovereign citizen movement in a slightly different manner now, detracting from the sovereign citizen ideology of the police and instead moving towards a counter-argument that may be fruitless or a waste of time, that wastes the court's time after filling the court with so many people that have chosen to stand up and argue against what would be considered a foreign curial line of authority, as established in Kiskonan versus New South Wales. So, what we are seeing is a foreign curial power that has committed heinous international criminal offences, including forced medical procedure, and which continues to, through force, enslave and manipulate a population outside of the burdens of warfare, now called slavery at international law, at which your Commonwealth, under the Slave Trade Act 1874, saw the merging of all the slave trade acts into one act, wherein voluntary servitude was left as the only form of legal slavery. This is employment. You obviously choose to go and work for someone. This is the army. You choose to go and serve your country. This is voluntary servitude or service. It's the only form of legal slavery within the boundaries of law that have been laid out at The Hague and within your very own country. And what we are seeing now is these magistrates try and defend their position when they have knowingly committed these acts of slavery. At the beginning we mentioned that Charles III would be coronated to the Stone of Destiny. And in this coronation, oaths of office are then inherited to become oaths to Charles III. This means that these magistrates are under oath, and this oath is through a king down to a Stone of Destiny, which does not match up with the defined realm that Anzac forged, laying down the Stone of Remembrance. We now see two curial rights by their stone, and we see magistrates that are under oath to a foreign curial power by its foundations. So what we see, as I mentioned, with King Charles being coronated, is a curial position. And these magistrates through a line of authority, hold oath to this curial position. This Aboriginal magistrate, who is in fact by his hereditary English, has been overseeing this rabbit and following it, mentioning David Halpin in the media, brings to fore a very, very important question. What is sovereignty? What is an Aboriginal man doing working for the courts of New South Wales in the first? What tribe does he proclaim to be from? Because the media asked him the question, are you Aboriginal? And he said, yes, and no more. Your sovereignty is dependent on your lineage, and whether that be patriarchal or matriarchal in your sky story is irrelevant. An inheritance takes place within a family body of people that is handed on to their children. And if an Aboriginal man, under oath to a king foreign, under foreign stone of destiny, external to stone of remembrance and realm of Anzac, is not of his family, what is his lineage? What oath does he really hold true at his heart? And this is important because we have a federal government that's currently allowing the total mockery of the very system at which they are under oath to. And this would come under Section 80 of the Criminal Code. The act of treachery, being a traitor to one's country, performing an act of treason to the realm, committing international humanitarian law offences while under treaty, committing international war crimes while in theatres of war. A curial position puts this into the foreground, while this oath is relevant to these magistrates who are obligated to a line of authority wherein a Supreme Court justice features above them in that line. They are to uphold what is spoken at the Supreme Court, but yet on the media speak in contradiction to those findings. Why then would a federal government with obligations to its duty of allegiance allow a mockery to occur within the very sacred halls of ministry of the Parliament itself? These halls of God in which they hold the public trust, in God we trust, have become a clown show wherein burqas have been used to mock, and certain people have been allowed to rant and scream like children. At some point, the Speaker of the House is to be held responsible for allowing these things to occur on the floor at which they are chair. And this brings to fore the actions of Lydia Thorpe, especially over the last months since election. It is a strange event to see such a lady become a senator in such strange circumstances wherein nobody actually voted for her until someone had left their seat and she asked to fill it. She is a failed senator, and she makes mockery of the very oath at which she took in Parliament. During the oath taking, she'd take mockery to the very curial power at which she decided she would work for. And in that decision to work for, took oath of allegiance before taking oath of office to become senator. She then went on to protest against the very government at which she worked for, to the extent of declaring war against that government on behalf of, I quote, her peoples. Now, her peoples are a small mob of people in the Victorian areas and don't constitute all of Aborigine across Australia. She can only speak for her mob, at which then her elders have a standing over her within that society and leaving her in a position of no power to speak curially on the matter anyway. It's up to her elders to speak on her behalf. She then goes and makes mockery of the Crown and its Parliament, at which she has taken a legally binding oath to, so far as to ask the King himself for an apology while working as senator for Victoria under Crown in Right of Victoria. So we are doubly binding Crown obligation here in that she was chosen for the state of Victoria to represent as a senator in the federal parliament under oath of allegiance and oath of office. Her open willingness to do this and the use of this Aboriginal magistrate with English lineage and this rabbit that has been followed brings to the fore the act of treason. King via Casement, 1917. And Lydia Thorpe did declare war by protest in front of many, recorded by media, against the Crown at which she is under oath to. You could try and call this a political statement, but you must take the words and the actions and the fist bumping and the address into its full context. She is and has committed treason to her oath, wherein she declared war against all Victorians whom she was supposed to represent by declaring war on behalf of her peoples, wherein she meant her mob or Aboriginal tribe, as proclaimed by herself on her Twitter profile. It's a very inexcusable offence that is very highly documented by media and social media posts and ramblings. So we get back to a magistrate and this ideal of sovereignty, given that Lydia Thorpe has declared war on behalf of her peoples, wherein she has no right to speak on behalf of her elders. This sovereign right of Aborigine within the Crown does not exist. There is a reason for the Voice attempting to destroy what would be an Anglican parliament. And there is one very good reason for this. It's very easy to explain, and it's very blunt. They shall not be counted. They shall not be counted. Section 127 of the Constitution that was changed by referendum in 1967 after foreign curial power lowered your Admiralty ensign and replaced it with white ensign of said curial power. What is sovereignty if you are proclaiming to be an Aboriginal magistrate? What is sovereignty if you are proclaiming war from a position of senator of a parliament foreign to your sovereignty? What is sovereignty if a curial right was defined on court record, Kiskanen versus New South Wales, giving Stephen that curial right if our people would stand with him in what would be called self-determination? What is sovereignty? It seems to me that all of your ideals of sovereignty are a total shit show and a clown show, while these magistrates are scrambling to save their very asses because the entire magistrate court of New South Wales across New South Wales have been found to be guilty of war crimes, a hangable offence in a military tribunal before The Hague. They are guilty of this offence, demonstrative of the actions of Matthew Reason, David Halpin, Corrective Services and Forensic Mental Health inside Corrective Services New South Wales. They cannot get around this. It is documented on the Supreme Court record. What is sovereignty to the Aborigine who refuses to act as his tribe while he tries to undermine a parliament that does not belong to him, wherein that parliament said they shall not be counted? Why were they not to be counted? Were they their own peoples prior to 1967? What is native title? What is crown title? What is sovereignty? These things exist before the judicial systems, making these magistrates scramble like rats on the sinking ship that they are on. And it's inevitable. They are going to lose. It's inevitable. The path has already been written. It is on the Supreme Court record, and the curial right has been sealed and recognised by Supreme Court justices, as has done before in history. It's not the first time this has happened, wherein an ordinary man has proclaimed to be of a curial right before a judicial system and been acknowledged for having that right. So we must now look, what is treason? And this is a very important question, because now we're discussing internally the problem of being a traitor to your own commonwealth and its gods. Because externally, we look at international humanitarian law, the laws of armed conflict, international war crimes, while in battle theatre, like in Afghanistan, as discussed by the Brereton report, at which Tony Abbott saw command responsibility, being the one that declared that technical war, while in Arnhem Land, of all places, he chose Aboriginal territory to declare war from instead of the actual Commonwealth. It's a very interesting aspect of something that is going on. You only need to see the remarks of Tony Abbott in relation to The Voice. The Voice is something that denies Aboriginal sovereignty, given that the Parliament had stated prior to 1967 that they should not be counted. If you can't see these things, you obviously deserve to lose them as tribes, as natives, as naked owners of the usufruct at which administrators under rules of usufruct administer your soil. We have gone through this time and time and time again. Only now we have a Supreme Court justice that has recognised the war crimes of a chain of command starting within the police force. We have magistrates all over the media attempting to stand up for what they have done in light of the fact that the things that they have done have led to heinous war crimes and international humanitarian offences, including heinous crimes against humanity and crimes against nature. It's very evident, given the way that the propaganda machine has turned its wheel and the things that it has presented while it follows the rabbit-o-o-os through the courtroom into a magistrate that's a war criminal against a football star who was English and had a curial right that you didn't recognise. So we get back to this football star that was held before a court of a foreign curial power when he had a lineage and an ancestry and a right through his Anzac to defend and stand up to said magistrate and say, "No more, Nanny. Get out of the father's house." And this is where we come to this closing sort of argument, in that we are watching the rats on a sinking ship face the death penalty, at which they could be hung from the neck until dead, or face the blade of force falling down on them like a guillotine into a basket where they can blink the last values of life from their petty little heads. Taking command responsibility to attack a non-belligerent people who believed in their own ancestry and lineage and foundations forged in those international waters where they defined said curial right to stand against what is an occupying curial power on their soil, administering their parliament and governance under rules of usufruct, causing and committing fraud, creating criminal actions, and at the end becoming war criminals at international law that have participated in multi-international battle theatres wherein they have murdered civilians and manipulated and twisted and controlled populations. And they've been caught out at it. So have fun as you watch all of these men scramble to save their petty little lives after they have manipulated and caused criminal actions against hundreds, if not thousands, of people across the states of Australia, but mostly New South Wales at this point. They denied inspectors into their corrective services facilities in full knowledge of the fact that curial rights were claimed in self-determination, wherein they actually did commit Rule 90 and Rule 92 international humanitarian law offences. And that's the part that they don't comprehend. They did it already. It's not like they were going to do it, plan to do it, or it was coming up. It's been done. They are guilty of sin. They are heinous international war criminals. Your politicians and your magistrates and your police officers are committing international war crimes against you on a daily basis. You have the right to stand with red ensign and stand up to them. You have the right to question them in their courts over their line of authority and their standing with God and their oath to a foreign curial power, where a stone of destiny is being shown to you before the world this week. It is undeniable. They are in a position wherein they agreed to all of these international treaties, pacts and conventions, and must follow them to the letter of the law. Isn't that right, Mr. Albanese? The cheesy Albanese always says that they must follow the rules of law. Rule of law, right, Mr. Albo? Is it not time you brought the rule to the fore and followed that law? Because we came not to break the law, we came to fulfill it with our curial right and standing to a stone that is not what you represent, is it? The men of this country will rise. They will gather and find lines of command. They will define themselves with their red ensign, and they will know they are an occupied people. They will stand up to your magistrates as much as possible. They will speak down to you as if you are foreign curial powers. They will question your motives and your legislations at every avenue and chance they will get. They will fill your courts until 60 and 70 of your day become the questioning of your line of authority after you have committed heinous international criminal offences at which you should be found guilty before tribunals before the Hague and taken life thereof for your very own actions. And that's the tough part. That's the hard part. You committed the fucking crime. You pay at the highest end of the law at which you were obligated to uphold because you're the administrator that pushed it on everyone else. You're the slave driver. You're the privateer. You're the shipmaster. You're the one with all the men in your docks. You're the one treating them as lots and slaves. You're the one pushing their sweat labour to the edge while you push them with burdens of warfare and financial burdens after you have committed international criminal offences within your very own rules. You have no right to stand anymore, and it is time to step aside for the sheer fact that you have removed yourselves from power for actually breaking the law. And we could get to Section 44 and citizenship and the lies that you've told and Rodney Cullerton and the scams that you've put before the High Court. And we could stand before the High Court and we could define these very things very harshly and very, very strongly, at which you now must step aside. You are war criminals. You are criminals. You are national criminals. You are state criminals. You are heinous. You are beyond reproach. It is in this that all Australians should recognise and take the power at which they have a curial right to stand in. This game must end. This game must stop. It is inevitable that they will lose. They have lost the right of usufruct, and the naked owner presents itself in a fraud and international criminal offence. In the presentation of naked ownership, this can only mean the removal of what is a criminal administration. And at the end of the day would demonstrate that they are here under pure military force, at which they have never cared for the lives of Australians, while Albo, from his foreign curial power, proclaims that you are free, while you are piling before magistrates' courts, having your liberties taken from you for entire days at a time, while you question these magistrates and these prosecutors over how they proclaim to have authority over you. And now you can say, how can you proclaim to hold that authority in your own criminal actions? In your crimes you shall step down, you shall step out of office, you shall give up your authorities. At law you shall step aside, and the judicial systems shall decide on the amount or level of your guilt. So I guess we could close by rabbit-toto. I guess we could close by coming back to Sam Burgess and what would be considered forced medical procedure on a roadside by a highway patrol in a workplace wherein a occupational health and safety or workplace health and safety must apply, and a duty under Donahue versus Stevenson 1932 must also apply, wherein he was in vehicle registered in a private capacity, not commercial, being forced to interact with commercially levelled policy enforcers. A war crime had been committed on the roadside, and we will get to that in the long run. We have some other little ventures into how you have been tortured and enslaved. And this is real. This is unfortunately reality coming to you in full colour. This ain't no Western black and white. This is your full colour. So it's going to smack you quite hard in the reality that many of the people that you believed were here to help you were in fact undermining you and committing crimes while they were doing it. It's going to be a harsh reality that in a biblical sense some of these things come true, in that people are taken for their crimes, and that a system of rules will have to be followed. It's not us that committed these international war crimes. It is the agents of an administering government that has attempted to proclaim its sovereignty by usurping the states away from the people and then treating the people as fodder or wards of state. It is in this control of your family affairs and your family estate, wherein policy enforcers have sought to intrude into the private, including that of being on the road registered for use in the private. It could then be said that Sam has been inflicted by an international war crime, including the right of privacy, the right of property, the right of family, and this forced medical procedure, all in a roadside stop. I mean, we could go further in the breaking of Australian laws, but it could be demonstrated that a foreign imperial power has no care for those laws, and that international laws of armed conflict or international humanitarian law therefore apply. It is then brought to the attention of those that are scrambling on this sinking ship that, in your own words, you said that if you made these rules, it would be a poison chalice to your own lips, of which you have now sipped upon. It is at your own hand that you will find your demise. And this is the unfortunate truth. The foundations that were forged preceded my time and yours. These foundations that have defined conventions, pacts and treaties between international bodies will outlive our time as well. It was for you to know the rules of the game at which you played, and you chose to ignore or believe that those rules either did not exist or just plain did not apply to you. And it's that unfortunate truth that has become your undoing across these magistrates' courts, wherein you complain about the problems you see when all we see are a bunch of criminals. At some point, you have sowed the seed of your own demise. It can't be said any simpler than that when a historical record can prove the very words that are being spoken by a people across the land that believe in the rising of the sun, and in that morning we did remember them. It is in that self-determination and the hand of God, tickety-tock, there's a sky clock, at which we can say first in time, first in law. And we can also say that they shall not be counted, and we see through the mirror into their worlds. Worlds they seem to have abandoned to join the courts of magistrates, at which their hand could then be said to have committed crimes against their own peoples, at which they claim to be Aboriginal across a land at which they were never one people. They shall not be counted until they face the magistrates' courts of New South Wales before Aboriginal judges with English lineage. We have a rather large issue in that after this demise of a currency and a curial usurpation, in that Aboriginal legal services were created, and you will find them in the news today running out of money. How is this possible if they were a sovereign peoples standing as tribal kingdoms across a land? What is the Aboriginal Legal Service? What is the Law Society? What is the legal aid? When were all these things introduced? What is the family court? Why were all these things introduced in 1974 after the demise of a people into this occupied territory wherein a sovereign peoples that shall not be counted were issued with crown native title that had been usurped from an Anglican peoples? This is the reality of the situation wherein you find foreign papist and Catholic powers have come into your land and united and then divided a people so as to maintain control of a usufruct in a fraud and deceit. A war criminal will not stop because he has already committed a crime. And in the knowing that we see these crimes, knows the repercussions are strong and real and therefore will not stop. It was said that the sitting down of good men that do nothing allow this evil to occur. And we can see that people across the land are now speaking up and saying, "Who are you? Where does your authority come from? If you were true and honest, you would show us and tell us. But you refuse to do so, and you have refused for a very long time. It is in this that we question your very authority as authoritative rather than respective of a people and their laws." This continued rising of the sun as an Asiatic people watch a river flow before them as it rises, and they see from solstice to solstice as the snake entwines itself with the earth. And they begin to understand that they are anchored by the heavens, and that their spirit is through that anchor linked to the fathers that died in battle, so that they could live in the peace that they retain, while belligerent and criminal people continue to manipulate the public trust and stop that true peace from occurring. It's a long and winded game that is very slowly becoming apparent to a lot of people. And as they begin to raise a red ensign and remember who they actually fly this flag for, and it could be said that their very unity and the solidarity that we see day to day in our societies as we move around our towns and our cities. Generally, as a people, we are very kind people to each other, and we generally have each other's backs against this state mechanism that has built fences around its parliaments and put bollards up around its buildings to defend itself from what it is pushing into a riling society on purpose. But in our neck of the woods, so to speak, Australia, we don't tend to rile up so much in violence against what we know we can mock to the point of disappearing. It is unfortunate to say that we can't do that this time. We must stand up to these people. They are, in fact, war criminals. If we wanted to hold a Nuremberg trial, we would need the standing to be able to do so. That standing has been defined on the court record as a curial right linked to a stone, at which a people can rise in defence of a line of authority left to them by their ancestors, instead of a foreign occupying curial power that came onto your land to manipulate and control your trade routes. It could be said then that you could push them out to the Pacific Rim where they belong in the defence of that ocean at which Scott Morrison always spoke of. The Pacific Rim, he always said. Rule of law, he always said. And Cheesy Albanese, he's had to follow the same line because the rules are on the table. And these magistrates are on a sinking ship because of these rules that we have shown you over many years now. It has taken time for an understanding to go across a population wherein they start to see that there are actually criminal offences taking place and that there are criminal members of not only the police force, the parliament, but also the defence force as well. It is clear and evident that this is true through a Brereton report and the Kiskonen case, wherein the same curial power would have come onto the table during events in Afghanistan, at which SAS soldiers had been found to have committed international war crimes more than 13 times. These are harsh realities, as I keep saying, and it is up to these agents of this power to come to the minimum of what they are required to do in case they cross that line into a war crime, in the knowledge that our people and our men will stand up and now defend a curial right in numbers growing in large capacity across the country, given that a magistrate himself admits that this is clogging up the court system. So, in my opinion, one should fight every fine. One should fight everything that a police officer throws at you, given that his duty is in the public and he is invading your private. Given that international law applies, you could then bring to the fore the right of family and the invasion of your family property. You could bring to the fore the right of property and the invasion of that property by these policy enforcers. You could bring to the fore all of the torture, slavery, forced medical procedure and medical experimentation that they have done and do every day as part of your defence. It matters not what these magistrates think if you appeal into a judicial system which will then uphold the law. That's the tough part for a magistrate, when you could go through this entire case and present all of these arguments and be denied by said police magistrate, only to appeal before the judiciary and have your case heard with God in the background. A God that these police magistrates seem to ignore. This is part of the reason why they have committed the war crimes they have committed. It is either in their ignorance or their blatant criminal activity wherein they have used excessive force at law to achieve their objectives. This could be spoken about for a very long time. Obviously, if you were to hold trials against these people, evidence would have to be put before courts, and judiciary would spend many hours looking through these evidences to come to conclusions as to their guilt or their sentencing. And this is the harsh reality. This could change your society forever, and a world would start to recognize how it is not free, how people like Cheesy Albanese actually enslave them, how you are treated like children who need to be reprimanded by this state government at every chance they can get to gain revenue from you to pay off a machine wherein they keep putting you in debt. It is a foreign power that has come here to drive your assets while you ignore the fact that they are a foreign curial power. We could go further into their allegiances and their sympathizing with enemies across the world, including that of real-world Nazi, but that is outside of the scope of this audio. We can see how our government has taken it upon itself to attempt to achieve a sovereignty over and above the people, which is impossible to achieve without the people, given that they are citizens under a pledge to something that is not de jure or naked in ownership. These are the technical legal realities and ramifications of the world in which you all sowed to live in. And it is up to you to come and pull out all the chaff where the fields could grow with fruits instead of those weeds. And the Bible told you very clearly that thou cannot serve two masters. And if one of those masters treats you as a slave, technically at international law, then it would be clear to say that the other master may be the fairest of them all. Mirror, mirror. There is a harsh reality in what is being presented, and it can't be undone. This is the one thing that we have laid out on the table, is a reality that is adherent to the judiciary and your foundations with God at law. And these things need to be observed very clearly in the full discretion of what could be seen as larger than a Nuremberg trial. So we leave that with you and have fun with that hour, I suppose. I have meant what I said in that they are who they are, and you have a chance to be